side. Boston going to work. Scores off the backboard. 4 seconds to go. Boston to Hull. Left wing. Fires a three. Good! Hull heads with .3 to go in the third.
Well, Danielle, it's been a couple weeks since we've done a podcast, and gotta say, it was a little disappointing. UConn lost in the Final Four. We thought they were looking unbeatable. We said there was only one thing we thought that could beat them is if the refs let the games get real physical. And I think you think, and I think Gino Ariema thinks the refs let the game get real physical.
Yeah. And it's tough because UConn didn't play particularly well. Even in the Elite Eight and Sweet 16, it felt like it was just a struggle. Was it the rims? Was it the balls? What? Who knows? And then you go into the Final Four, and the whole first quarter and the whole third quarter, the refs called zero fouls on South Carolina, and they're a very physical team. So I think that just kind of compounded, and they weren't able to get over it. And they ended up shooting 6 free throws to South Carolina's 22, and couldn't even break 50. So tough game. AZ could never really get going. Sarah Strong didn't look like she thought she was the best player out there. And yeah, it was just an ugly game.
Yeah, it was ugly. It was unfortunate. We always feel like South Carolina is physical and Texas is physical, and UConn plays a pretty version of basketball. At least that's how we talk about it, and we enjoy that version of basketball more. But yeah, if the refs are going to call the game the way they did, you can almost no team could have beaten South Carolina. I mean, if you get
Right.
zero fouls called in half the game, in two of the quarters, zero fouls are called on your team, and you're a very aggressive defensive team. I mean, it'd be almost impossible for any team to win that game. I mean, Stewie's UConn team would have had trouble with the way the refs officiated that game,
Sure.
I think. So it was really
Yeah. But you
unfortunate.
did
Yeah, it was
also
just
see
unfortunate
just
for
how
us.
much they missed. Yeah. You did see how much they missed Paige, and having a player like that who isn't afraid of the moment, is willing to, Paige, if they're struggling, Paige just would have gone and gotten a shot off, and she makes those more often than not. And at some point, it just felt like no one really wanted to take the shot. Ashlyn actually shot pretty well. Janice was the first off the bench, but hardly played. Blanca got in foul trouble. It was just like nothing was going their way. And then the other Final Four game, Texas versus UCLA, was even uglier and even more low scoring than like the 48-62 or whatever that UConn game ended up being. But UCLA deserved to win just for the fact that they scored more than 70 points in a game in the Final Four, I think. And it's a feel-good story with they had 6 seniors. They stuck together. Um, and yeah, you can't be mad about that.
Yeah, and I think we said it as the second best outcome as far as we were concerned. We were happy to
Yeah.
see UCLA win. The Big Ten
Big
swept,
Ten represent.
yeah, swept the major championships this year. IU in football, Michigan men
Yeah.
won, and UCLA women won. So go Big Ten. That was exciting to see. Um, but you said, you can't be mad about that. But speaking of mad, Gino kind of lost his Italian temper a little bit there.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. Like right when I think UConn was dribbling out the clock, and there was when there's like 1.6 seconds extra between the shot clock and game clock, and there was so he started walking up to shake Dawn's hand, and um, apparently he said something, and she had a big reaction to it, and he had a reaction to her reaction, and then they were kind of going at each other and had to be separated. Um, and yeah, it sounds like he made some comment about her not shaking his hand before the game. Like usually they announce the starters, they announce the coaches meet at half court and shake hands. Apparently he just she left him there for like 3 minutes and didn't come and shake his hand. And I saw somewhere later that she had done the same thing the previous year. Um, so
Hmm.
I I mean, he was obviously just frustrated about the game, and that's like the dumbest thing to be frustrated about. Be mad at the refs. If Don didn't shake your hand, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. To Don's credit, beyond like the reaction in the moment, I think she handled it really well and kind of right immediately after the game was like, asked Gino about it if, you know, and then later put out a statement saying, I mean, she got asked about it leading up to the Final Four, but was like, I'm not checking messages or anything. I'm just focused on their next game. And then Gino issued an apology the next day and then talked to her after the championship was over. And then she issued a statement that was basically like, I talked to Gino. I have a lot of respect for him and what he's done for women's basketball. Let's move on. Because, of course, the media was drumming it up and making it seem like the end of the world.
Yeah, well, a couple of things I wanted to add to that. I mean, I'd really like to see what happened, I guess, last year also then, if that's what the internet said, because ESPN tried to gaslight us by showing Dawn shaking everybody's hand.
Hmm.
But that was like not what Gino, it was not the time frame Gino was referring to. He was referring
Right.
to what you mentioned when the teams were introduced, and head coaches always do that. They always, that's the tradition in college basketball, it seems. They announce the starters, then announce the head coaches. Head coaches walk towards each other, meet at half court, shake hands, hug, whatever, and wish each other well, whatever they say to each other. I mean, it's like every single college basketball game they do that. And if it's true that Don didn't do it, like ESPN just totally tried to gaslight everybody by showing Don going and shaking. But you could tell that wasn't what he was the time frame
Right.
he was referring to because she went and shook everybody's hand, like all the
Yeah.
assistants. It wasn't right
It was
before the
must have been
game.
when they just took the court to for
Yeah,
warm-ups or
during
something,
warmups. Yeah, I mean, it was so disingenuous of ESPN to do that. But ESPN's in bed with the SEC. So honestly, like I don't trust anything the ESPN says about the SEC. They're just gonna do whatever. Try to like we're gonna cheer for the Big Ten, but we're not journalists. You know, the ESPN is cheering for the SEC. It seems like, and they have unbalanced coverage. But the other thing I wanted to say is, it was a bad look by Gino, but I grew up cheering for IU when Bobby Knight was the coach, and I've seen far worse than what Gino did, and still was
sure.
an IU fan. And you can recognize, I always felt like in Indiana there was often people either loved Knight or hated him, and I always felt like I had a pretty balanced view of him. Like I loved how he coached the game of basketball. I didn't appreciate some of the things he did and some of the ways he behaved, and but I still appreciated the way he played basketball, so I still cheered for IU. So it's not going to change my fandom of UConn one bit for what happened. It's still going to be my team to cheer for in the coming years. So speaking of the coming years, any thoughts as we kind of wrap up the college season here and what next year looks like? Who are the teams to beat?
Yeah, so this year it was the first time that in like quite a few years that the Final Four was all back. Like 25 and 26 was the same Final Four. And it feels like, well, at first my initial thought was just slot UCLA out, put USC in, and it'll be the same for like UCLA's graduating six seniors. I don't expect them to be back. They'll still be a top program, probably a top 15 program. They'll get some transfers, some freshmen. But and then USC Juju hopefully will be back healthy. They have Jazzy Davidson, and then what's her name? The number one pick coming in.
Is it Sanaya Hall? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, someone asked Don Staley at one of those game pressers about Sanaya Hall coming in, and they were like, "Oh, oops, the other USC, sorry." Like, yeah, USC. Um, so UCLA I think will be good, but not great. USC I think is the team to beat. ESPN put out a way too early top 25 list and had UConn at one, which I was actually surprised about because usually any chance to knock UConn down is taken.
ESPN does,
Um,
yeah.
and I
Well, probably
don't,
because USC is not a SEC team.
yeah, maybe so. Because, yeah, I mean, Juju coming back, potentially her last year in college with multiple other number one picks. I think it's USC's next year. but expect South Carolina and UConn to be there. So those two have kind of proven that they're perennially Final Four teams. Sarah Strong is gonna be even better somehow. Blanca will hopefully be starting finally. Jana might even be starting if we're lucky, or maybe the freshman. Um, so I expect UConn will be back. Um, I think South Carolina will be better. This We were talking to some friends who are South Carolina fans, and like I was telling them, it's crazy. Like this, I think was the worst South Carolina team since Asia left, and they made it to the championship game. So like
Mm.
you've arrived when like a down year is losing in the national championship game. So I
Yeah.
expect those two teams will be back. I think USC. I thought Texas, but Texas obviously loses Rory Harmon to graduation. And then they have Madison Booker coming back, and she's projected to probably be the number two pick next year. But then they lost their next three players to the portal. So do they get new pieces to make up for that, or do they kind of drop off next year, losing out on the majority, like four of their key pieces of this year?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Texas will have a down year. I just can't imagine they'll be a top four team again. I would imagine Michigan could slot in as one of the top four teams then.
Yeah,
I would see
Michigan, or
them.
I would say Vanderbilt would kind of take the SEC spot for Texas.
Yeah, yeah. But I think Michigan and USC, like USC, it'll be interesting with USC. They're going to be young, you know. I mean, did they get Okoke or whatever her name is, that late sign?
I
Didn't she
think
sign with
so.
USC?
I think so. But yeah, it
So
is
that
interesting
was
because Juju they'll have a senior in Juju, but she's only played 2 years of basketball, and she's never played with
these
Jazzy
other, right,
or Sanaya Hall. So
right.
if they
Yeah.
can get it
So
together by the end of the year, I think they're going to be the
where their
team to beat.
ceiling is really high, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe USC has the highest ceiling next year, but we'll see if
Yeah,
they can reach their ceiling or not, I think
sure.
would be the
And I think
question.
it's three pretty ball dominant players. So like how does that come together with those
Yeah.
three number one picks?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Big Ten will be, I mean, they'll have USC and Michigan. UConn will always be up there, I think, as a top four team. And then the SEC, probably South Carolina and Vanderbilt will be the two best teams in the
Yeah.
SEC. So those are probably the top five teams, I would imagine, in the country going into next year.
Hmm.
So, all right. And then IU, we'll see. IU's got a lot of transfers going out again, but got a good freshman class. I
Yeah,
think their best recruiting class ever coming in.
Caffey was kind of the heartbreaker for IU this year,
It's
transferring out.
the only big disappointment was losing
Hmm.
Caffey, I think.
Yeah, because like Stotine, there's potential there, but she didn't get a lot of minutes, so you understand. She's like, okay, I'm behind Caffey. I'm gonna go find, more minutes somewhere else. But
Yeah.
you really saw Caffey come along and be playing much better at the end of the year, and so that's like for us, I think like what we enjoy so much about women's college basketball is like getting to see teams develop and follow players over the course of a career as opposed to the men's, which is like if you're good, you're doing one and done and going pro if you can, or maybe you stay for one more year if you think you can, get your NBA pick higher the next year. But
Yeah.
a lot of men's college basketball feels more like NBA tryouts than team basketball. So it's disappointing that that's spreading to the women's side with NIL stuff, and hopefully there will be some legislation that kind of settles that down a little bit, where it's not just transferring out to get a bigger paycheck every year.
Yeah. I mean, the Michigan men, whole starting lineup were transfers. They were
Right.
first year players at Michigan,
Yeah.
which I mean speaks a lot, I guess, to the coaching staff's ability to get the team to gel, but also speaks to the things we don't like about modern college men's basketball, as
Right.
you
Yeah. You
said.
contrast that to six seniors at USC or UCLA rather. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
yeah, it's
Neepkins was a transfer in, but
sure. Yeah. I don't know
otherwise,
if all of them started their, like, and Betts even was a transfer after her freshman year at Stanford. So not that all of them were there.
this Betts was there for most of her career.
Yeah.
Jaquez was, Rice was. So, I mean, that was a solid core that had the majority of their career to develop together. So,
Right.
yeah, very different. And that's why we do prefer, one of the reasons we prefer the women's game. But
Yeah.
all right, so hopefully IU can have a little better season, and we'll have more to talk about with them next season.
Yeah, the only other thing for IU women is does Shay get drafted? And if so, does she make a team? She had such a phenomenal shooting year. I think you can see with expanded roster spots in the W this year, even with those developmental spots, does a team take a serious look at her? Does she go play overseas for a year or two and then try to make a team?
Yeah, well, hopefully she'll be able to get drafted, and she's short. That's her only issue. I think it's going to make her hard. I think it'll be hard for her to make a roster initially, but like you said, maybe she'll have other options. Go to Europe. She's such a great shooter, and
Yeah.
so I hope she does get a chance. So yeah, so UConn had a great season, a 54 game winning streak.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, snapped, but it was a fun year to watch UConn, and looking forward to seeing them again next year. Hopefully they have a great season and hopefully be able to win the title. For the W Hoops podcast today, everyone please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment or a review, and we'll see you next week.